Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of La Vida Baseball Live. I'm Julie Alexandria here in San Diego with Ozzie Guillen Jr. in Chicago and Jennifer Mercedes in New Jersey. We got it all for you here today. We are going to be talking about after the trade deadline, which happened on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The bell rang, and now it's behind us, and we effectively have just 4 weeks until the 2020 postseason starts, which is absolutely crazy to wrap your head around. But we're going to be talking about the team's biggest winners, the team's biggest losers, and we're going to be talking about who did what, and also kind of our mid-season all-stars, if you want to call it that, and our newsmakers. Plus, we're going to be ending the show with a little diversity talk when it comes to Major League Baseball broadcast booth. How you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you?
We're good. Let me tell you, San Diego is a buzz. Is like nothing I've ever seen before. This is now effectively, for the first time ever, or at least in my lifetime, it is a baseball town.
I mean, I get the same feeling even on social media with all of, the bandwagon fans, Julie. I've seen some of the posts, I've seen some of the tweets. But how fun is it?
It's great. You know what? I get a taste. It feels like I'm back on the East Coast. San Diego is getting San Diegans have to now learn the rules of baseball at this point because they need to start learning how to surf and learning what baseball is all about. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, a bit of sad news because we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are still living through, and these guys are effectively playing through, a global pandemic, with news that Pirates outfielder Socrates Brito opted out of the 2020 season after his brother passed away from complications of COVID-19. Now, Socrates was diagnosed with the coronavirus earlier on before the season started. He was part of that 60-player pool, and he had a chance this year to make the team, to actually come up and play in the major leagues. He is letting that go in honor of his family, choosing family over the game and sitting out.
Yeah, I mean, our condolences first and foremost to he and his family, but what a choice to have to make, right? But choosing family over playing the game is something that I think we will, for the most part, always choose. And this just shows how close to home this can hit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Jen said, our condolences to Socrates and his entire family. Moving on, let's talk about last night, an incident that happened in the Bronx between the Yankees and the Rays involving Aroldis Chapman in his first closing appearance of the 2020 season. His name was trending on Twitter just as I was putting my laptop away here on the West Coast. And I had to dig in further. Some people are saying it was intentional. Some people were saying it wasn't, as he threw some high heat at the head of Brito. So, Ozzie, your take, was it intentional?
Bush League alert. New York Yankees coming through. Bush League alert.
Ooh.
This has been happening a lot in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And the Yankees should be embarrassed about this because the NY New York Yankees stand for more than this. They've been the standard of Major League Baseball on the way. And I'm disappointed because, Aaron Boone knows better. And this team now has been known for bullying, screaming, throwing at guys, and they can't beat Tampa. And yesterday, the part that made me upset was not only that he threw at his head, but then they were chirping at him once they struck out. Tampa the guy never even said anything, even after he threw after his head. Chapman has great control. He's not.
Does he?
Yeah, a lot of people were questioning.
He does. He came across. You could see when you look at his other stuff. He came across his leg. He was going up and in, and it was a message. Again, when you're throwing this hard, you can send a message below the head, and that's understandable. But you never, ever, ever, ever in the game of baseball, I don't care what the situation is, you throw anywhere above the shoulders. And that's just standard. Then the manager Cashman comes out and says something he has to say. He says, hey, I got a lot of guys throwing 98 plus myself. So, these are the things that, Tanaka hit somebody earlier in the game. They had hit a couple Rays guys. New York cannot beat the Rays. Look at the standings. They play them really well. And this is going to be a bean fest. And this is probably going to be the bench clearing brawl that we've been waiting for. going to happen because
okay. Well, I just want to clarify something because I misspoke, and I just want to clarify for the record. So this was his first save appearance of the 20.
Save appearance. He's pitched before.
He pitched three games. He pitched, I believe, three games. But two things. I don't think that what Cash said was right, even though, yeah, you want to defend your guys, you're out there publicly threatening the other team, right? So then it puts your team in a bad position because you can't say, oh, it was not intentional, because now we all know whatever happens from this point forward is intentional. So you got to keep those words to yourself, number one. Number two, I'm playing devil's advocate here. Watching the game, Chapman has only been back for 3 games. It was the bottom of the 9th, and they were only up by 2 runs. Are you going to purposefully hit somebody in that type of scenario, knowing how important these games are? It's not like they could have just, oh, well, whatever, just one game, we lose it. It's particularly playing against Tampa, who is in their division. So when you put all of those things together, yes, I believe he was throwing in, high and tight, but was his intention to throw at his head, in that could it have gotten away from him, a bit? That's my question. Obviously I'm not.
I don't think he was trying to hit him. I don't think he was trying to hit him. Again, he trying to scare him, and the ball, again, you facing Chapman, ball's coming like that, it changes your whole at bat. Again, that's where a pro Cashman said, hey, you know what? We also have guys that throw hard, and that's just a reminder to the Yankees pitching staff that they have a lot of fragile guys, and that's why I call them the fragile Yankees. They got a lot of guys that go to the DL. Again, the one part that changes in the game of baseball now from the past is, back in the day, there was only one Chapman, okay? One guy throwing 98 to 100. A lot of these bullpen guys, everyone throws heat. And if I'm a position player, okay, for the Yankees, I'm telling my pitchers, guys, don't go up in the mound and try to, be intimidating guys, because the ones that are going to pay, especially in the American League, especially with the dual DH now, is us, the hitters. So it's going to be intense. I think Chapman, to Jennifer's point of playing devil's advocate, he was in a situation that tempers already flaring because Tanaka had hit somebody that everybody thought was on purpose. It's been happening for a couple games. And then it was the chirping that was happening afterwards. Again, something that has become a very Yankee type of motto of their team. They're very in your face. They're very aggressive. And there's a lot of history between these two clubs. And obviously, the Yankees are the team with the most money. They're the most popular team. And they haven't led that division in a while. Tampa has. So it's a lot of things coming together, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fight to the end. I think these two teams are going to be fighting to the wire, down to the nitty gritty, and then they're going to be facing each other maybe in the playoffs, in the American League Championship. So it's going to be intense. There's going to be a lot of fun games to watch going down the road.
And yeah, two things before we move on to another subject. One, I am at least happy that we have a new rivalry. It's no longer Boston Red Sox and Yankees, because obviously Red Sox have not been doing much in a little bit of time. So that there's that, right? But then also another thing that Cash said, and thank you to John Boy for doing the breakdown as he always does. Cash also said there's never been a time, except for 3 years ago, when we intentionally threw at somebody, which was intentionally at Romine's head. So he is criticizing the very thing that they did 3 years ago. It's a little hypocritical if you look at it. And if I were there being able to ask him the question, I would say, well, is that not hypocritical? Because you just admitted to intentionally throwing at somebody's head 3 years ago.
It's all relative, right? Yeah. Just depends on who you're playing for. All right, well, moving on to the trade deadline, the winners and the losers. There is no denying that San Diego made a huge splash, and we're just going to call them winners with the addition of Mike Clevenger and Trevor Rosenthal. I mean, a 6-player deal, just they are stopping at nothing. They had said that 2020 was the year to turn rebuilding into results. And gosh darn it, they have done it. They had an off day yesterday. We're going to see this entire team now come to fruition as they take on the Angels today in Anaheim. So it'll be very interesting to see how they do. Let's talk about the losers. I would say, in my definition, a loser come the trade deadline are teams that are contenders but did absolutely nothing. So let's add the Yankees into that. Were you guys surprised the Yankees stood pat and didn't, given all the injuries that they have going on. No moves. And add to that, the Astros, the Braves, the Rays, and the White Sox. No real moves here.
Go ahead, Ozzy.
No, I think that, there no one talks about the international signing and the draft. Okay, I got to give credit to the Padres. Again, they depleted their minor league system, but they had players to deplete with. Okay, so they had numbers. A lot of teams, including the Chicago White Sox, which was a huge critique, and we've done a really bad job in the past years in signing in the international. What that means is we go and spend a huge chunk of money on a player like Luis Robert, but then we don't add bodies. What happens when you're going to make a trade? You don't have the bodies to move. Therefore, you don't want to basically mortgage your farm system. A lot of the teams that were able to move was because they had options. They had guys that were in the rookie Dominican Fall League that have a lot of potential that you can say, you know what, I can move this young player and not be affected. Somewhat what the White Sox did with Tatis a couple of years ago and landing what they thought at the time was a big name for them in James Shields. That didn't work so well for the White Sox, but you were able to make that move because of that move. Tatis was not a top prospect. He was just a kid with a big name. He had a lot of potential, but he had never played a game in the big leagues, in professional baseball. Sorry. So that brings a point to the international signing and why it's so important to sign a lot of players at good prices and build up your minor league systems to be able to make moves. I also think a lot of teams were shying away from making moves because of the shortened season. They don't know what next year is going to bring. They don't know what minor league baseball is at. A lot of people are kind of up in the air of what minor league baseball is going to look like. If you don't have minor league baseball, it's really hard to develop players. So you don't know what the next 2 to 3 years might look like for you. So I think that's why a lot of teams either shied away or couldn't pull the trigger was they didn't have the bodies to move for a trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think I hadn't thought of that point, right? Is you got to think about the farm system and where we're at and the amount of players that are needed even throughout this season right now. So, but I was surprised though with the Yankees. I think that they're banking on players on their injured list to come back and be healthy and ready. Hopefully it works out for them, but I was surprised. And then again, I wasn't because last trade deadline, we kind of saw more of the same.
Mm-hmm. I will say if the Padres do not make, well, they're kind of in the postseason at this point because so many teams will be making the postseason. But if they are not able to eclipse the Dodgers and take over the NL West, and if they are not able to win a trophy at the end of this 2020 condensed season, it will be seen as a failure because they have gone all out. No holds barred.
I don't think, I mean, I don't know. But for me, it wouldn't be seen as a failure because the amount of noise that the Padres have made this season is unlike any other season for them specifically. And I think that they have revitalized that fan base, that San Diego, I think even, across the country, we've seen new fans grow because of the way that these Padres are playing. So, I mean, technically, yeah, it's a fail, but I wouldn't say it's an entire fail of the season. I think that they've done a really good job, thanks to that 3-0 pitch of really letting their kids play.
Sign Clevenger. I think if you sign Clevenger, you use this opportunity like the Dodgers did. You extend him. He could become a number 1, number 2 in your organization moving forward. I think that they have the money, meaning that they have money to play around with because they need pitching, and they've done a really good job of developing the bats. The pitching is something that you can't. It's really hard to be both. That's why I think the Yankees were surprising that they didn't make a move for Clevenger. Okay, considering their depth, and there's guys that are basically stuck in not having a starting role because of the amount of offense that the Yankee has. I thought they would move maybe one of those 2 bats to get a pitcher like Clevenger. And then basically have a strong starting pitching staff, because right now, the main guy is Cole and then Tanaka, but it's not as strong as you would think you would want it to be like other teams. So I was surprised that the Padres, a team that usually doesn't win on the big trade, I think that they basically went and had the blockbuster deals on moving for the bigger names. And the Marlins, another team that I was super surprised, but I'm not surprised because Derek Jeter knows that his team gets into the playoffs this year, the legacy changes completely. To his defense, he did say he would make the playoffs in the next 6 years. No one said if it was with or without COVID. So he'll make good on that promise. But also when you're in the playoffs, the Marlins twice have gone to be world champions as a wild card team. So, they've been very dangerous in the postseason, and it could change a lot of the history of the Marlins, and they're going for it. So another team was the Toronto Blue Jays, a team no one's talking about, a lot of young players. They went and made a move for a couple arms, and they're also going for it. So there's a couple teams that are taking advantage of the 60-game season, saying, you know what, it's now or never, and we don't know what the next 3 years might bring, so let's do it now.
Yeah, I'm still interested in the argument, and perhaps this is something that we can save for another time, but how much weight will this championship of 2020 hold against other World Series championships?
If you won it, doesn't matter. If you didn't win it, you can always say, oh, we didn't win the one with the short season. But if you won it, you know what? And I think if the Houston Astros had given back their asterisk championship, you would say, we make a difference for different seasons, but they didn't. It counts.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a look at our midseason all-stars, if you want to call it that, since we don't have an all-star game or an all-star break. But here are the guys who are the best at their positions in the American League and in the National League. Check out this graphic that basically chooses who is doing the best. I love this. The Latin guys are dominating. Any surprise there with some of those names?
Surprised, no, but happy that Cano is having a really good season. He was getting a lot of flack for not being able to produce, and I think that this season has helped him. I think being able to DH has helped him. So I'm happy. Not surprising. I think we all know the talent that he has. So I'm just really happy that he's been able to succeed.
Mm.
Yeah, I was surprised that Nelson didn't make the All-Star team as a DH, leading the league in home runs. At 40 years old, what he's doing is it's outstanding. It's incredible. I like seeing players like Jose Abreu, who've done a lot of great in the league and kind of getting that recognition. And then obviously Luis Robert, who I believe has a chance to maybe be MVP and Rookie of the Year. He'll make a run for it. But you know what? When you look at the list, it's a lot of young players. It's a lot of new faces. And that's positive for the game of baseball. And these are the guys that are making this season fun to watch. So kudos to them.
Absolutely. And good to see Manny Machado making a case for MVP, because he has certainly turned around the last couple of years in San Diego. And moving on to the MLB League Leaders, let's just check in with guys who are dominating. You got to look at the names here, though. Check out 13 home runs with Cruz, Tatis Jr., and Voit. Fernando Tatis Jr. again leading the league with 33 RBIs, and Juan Soto with an OPS that is astronomical. Nice to see these guys making headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Ozzy, kind of surprised they didn't include Nelson in that list.
Trust me, he's a home run here. Tatis Jr. Has a bigger WAR than his father ever did in just his short career. It shows you the value that he has to a team. His team's in first place. Soto's doing it very quietly. His team's obviously not producing as well. But when you look at, the way that he's hitting, it's not him. It's been, I think that between him and Turner, it's just been that the team might be a little tired. But again, a lot of young faces, a lot of guys looking, and guys are looking to these numbers. When someone asks me about why Nelson Cruz is thinking that it's a 162-game season, because when Nelson goes to sign next year, they're still going to use that he's 40, clause and say, well, you're 40 years old. Why should we sign you? He's going to say, well, I hit 20-something home runs in a 60-game season. So,
and side note, Latino will be the MVP. Like that's.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I think that for sure. It might be both leagues. I think that Manny Machado. It's very hard because you got guys on their own teams competing for it. I got Tatis and Manny in the West Coast, and then I got the Jose Abreu and first baseman Abreu and Luis Robert in Chicago with Eloy very close. So it's going to be a race. Maybe it might fall into the same teams.
All right. Well, you mentioned Nelson Cruz. Here's a fun stat. When you look at Fernando Tatis Jr. and you check out Nelson Cruz, here it goes. This is the first time in the modern era since 1900 that two players age 21 or younger and age 40 or older have been tied for the major league lead in home runs. Tied at 13. I love that stuff. That's pretty cool. All right. Now we have about 10 minutes left here. I want to talk about the fact that there's an article in The Athletic, and Jen, you and I talk about this a lot, but I think it's worth having the conversation once again. And we're talking about the lack of diversity and changing the narrative in baseball's broadcast booths. I'll just go ahead and use San Diego as an example. There are two white gentlemen who host the pre and post game show. There are two white gentlemen in the booth, and there is one white gentleman as the in-game reporter. When you look at those faces, it's all contributing to one narrative, to one specific lens. Why not mix it up? And if there is no better time to do it, now is the time. The question is, how do we do it? Jen?
Well, yeah, I think that there's a number of options and in how to do that, and we've talked about this so many times. But if you want to start at the root, you start investing in youth, right? But if you want to do right now, and Julie, you and I talked about this before, there are so many organizations out there that represent minorities in media. All you have to do is look into their pool, be specific about what you're trying to look for, and not because you need to have somebody so that people don't talk about you, but because you need to have that representation, because those are your players that are out on the field. And something that I read in this article that I found to be very true is that the people telling the story of the players does not reflect the players themselves, and it hasn't for a very, very long time. I mean, you have Mota in the Angels, and he's like the only one as far as in the English language broadcast. We have the Spanish language broadcasters, but in the English language broadcast, you have very little to none African Americans, in-game reporters, African Americans. And the question is, why in 2020 is that still happening? Look to these groups, the NAHJ and the National Association of Black Journalists, and the list goes on. Go to HBCUs. Don't just go to the NYUs of the world. Go to different universities. Go to even community colleges and find out who is the outstanding media journalist student in your class, and try to invest in them. I think that that's part of the issue with society as a whole, is that nobody takes time to invest in the youth, particularly in the minority youth. You can say, oh, we have this program, we have that program, but you have to be very purposeful in how you do it.
Innovation does not happen when you do the same thing over and over again. There was a time when we were happy that we got to broadcast the game in Spanish, and the Latinos did the Spanish game, but we're past that. I think that there's enough talent to spread around. I also think it's a disservice when you look, if I'm running the media team, if I'm the owner and I sit down and I say, okay, we're only representing one group. Okay, this is not good. How do we diversify this? I think that the past years, gentlemen who are on the older side, okay, have made mistakes that have hurt the brand of teams and the way they're viewed. Okay, this is not 1970s. You should not be scared of taking a chance on a younger candidate because they're going to make a mistake. The mistake might come that, they might not call a home run as significant as a Hall of Fame broadcaster, for example, but maybe they one day will be a Hall of Fame broadcaster. I think that when you're doing the hiring, we're very stuck on, the old traditional guard. If your father was a broadcaster, where did he broadcast before? Oh, is he going to know enough about baseball? I'll be honest. I got to broadcast Major League Baseball as a Spanish broadcaster because my dad was Ozzie Guillen. If I had applied and my name was not Ozzie Guillen Jr., they would have never given me the chance. Yeah. And I got a chance to work, and I've talked to a million broadcasters who are way better than me, that know the game way better than me. And, when you see Jaime Jarrín come in and say, wow, you're a Latino broadcaster and you get to do this, it's a huge honor. And I didn't think it was a big deal then. Now that I'm not in it, that I'm looking into it, it's like, that was a big deal because they don't get hired. And it's just teams, not being away. The part that I think it's funny, which I think it's very interesting, is you can't have the excuse, well, we have this guy because he's a former player, okay? Because if you don't have a list of guys that want to get into broadcasting who are Latino, who want to broadcast in English, call me. I have a list of guys that are looking to get into the booth. So I just think it's teams taking a chance and hiring and saying, what do we have to lose? And before it was always, is the product going to be good? Yes. And yes, there's going to be mistakes, but it's going to be mistakes that you can live with. It's not going to be mistakes that you're going to hurt your brand on a hype mic or making the wrong comment or saying the wrong thing because you're broadcasting thinking that it's 1950s. And you can't do that. This generation is different. This generation, when you say something, they're going to listen and say, oh, what do you mean about that? What do you mean they're NBA players? we second guess everything, and that's because we're better educated. We live in a different world, and I don't know why teams don't take a chance and say, you know what, give a chance to the girl that just graduated college, put her in the big leagues. Let's see what she can do. And I feel like the teams that do that, you're really going to find the next wave of talent, because I think that we're always looking for the most experienced player, and it doesn't work because in baseball, there's rookie players, okay? And then they become amazing players, later down the line. In the booth, we look for experience, and it's, okay, well, I want the person that has 10, 15, 20 years experience. And it's not easy, especially when you come from a minority background because of many different reasons. So I think it starts bringing in the younger talent and saying, you know what, go for it, guys. Don't be scared, and you'll be able to do a good job. You do that, we're going to have a lot more diverse pool. And also, the games are more exciting when you have guys in the booth or in a team that all think the same way. The most exciting thing about this show, in my opinion, is your points of view, a female point of view, a different background point of view. If you have two guys in the booth that have the same background, the same way they view the game, it's the same broadcast. So having that back and forth of age, gender, diversity, different thought process, analytical to old school, that's what makes a broadcast fun. And that's where teams need to get it right.
And Ozzy, to your point about the audience, I mean, there is a reason why you'll see trending on Twitter sometimes, oh, I had to switch over to the Spanish language broadcast. Because the people who are watching, even if they don't understand the language, they understand the energy, they understand the culture, they understand that the environment in which our culture, lives in. And so, like you're saying, if you have only white men who are broadcasting the game, old white men.
Yeah, because there's not even any young white men. That's the thing people don't realize. There's not even any young white men.
You're shutting out, exactly. You're shutting out an entire generation, the entire generation that you want to reach. You're shutting them out because they're not speaking their language. You need somebody who speaks their language. You need somebody who knows what we're talking about when we says, yo, it was lit. We want to hear that on the broadcast. And I mean, even talking about people making mistakes and hot mics, I mean, it was an older generational man, white man, who made a mistake of his life in Cincinnati, having that hot mic. So, that's besides the point of having experience. He did something, he said something that was offensive, and that's going to happen regardless of experience or not.
And that's why I think social media now, when I watch the game, I got my social media open, is because sometimes the comments on social media are either funnier or more relevant, or they get information quicker to me than the actual broadcast. And that's why the broadcast booths, the ones that are really good, like the Mets, you get excited and you listen.
Ozzy, didn't you tell me, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to make sure to get this in. Didn't you tell me of this app or something that allows?
Yeah, well, you could broadcast. Yeah, you could broadcast the game, not simultaneously, but you could broadcast on a delay on your own game. And you know what? This is what happens. And again, I don't know why teams are scared to innovate and push something different. There's nothing you can lose. The NFL did it. The Thursday night game on Amazon, I believe it's on. It's two females calling the game. You could do that in baseball. You could have 7 people in the booth and calling the game for every demographic, and that's possible. And it's very easy to do. And you know what? I think it'd be so cool to just watch the game, to people to talk about what you want to hear. And that's just, when you're watching the game and someone's analytical, you can have an audience for that. Or when someone's a female, or when someone's a little bit older school. So I really hope that this pushes the agenda and the conversation of let's hire different. Let's stick away from the traditional, boring, and that happens because they interview 2 people, 2-3 people for the job. They don't open it up. We won't interview because you don't have the experience. You haven't given it to them.
That's so true. So many good points. Gosh, I would love to hear a broadcast with 7 different people from 7 different backgrounds, giving their input and telling the story and weaving a tale. That would be fantastic. Things to think about. All right, that's going to do it for us on this Wednesday. We'll be back next week with much more La Vida Baseball. Thank you, Ozzy. Thank you, Jen. And thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next week.